wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits, some losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip, you choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
As you can see, Stormclaw is tearing it up in Season 9. In this video, I'm going to walk you through additional tips, changes, and things I learned while working on this build. I'm also going to show you how it's performing in Torment 4, and pretty much anything else I can think of that's going to help you with your build. But before we get into all that, make sure you guys like, comment, and subscribe, and stop by my Twitch at twitch.tv/screamheart. Now let me show you what I got for you. Alright, so first off, this is my setup on my character right now. I'm in Torment 4, as you can see. I've got half decent items and somewhat masterworked. The only good item I have was one that was gifted to me, which is the Great Staff of the Crone, which is very nice. But this is not going to make or break your build, so don't worry about it. I'll go ahead and go through and show you my gear as it is, so you can see what is performing at this level. So we've got the 1 GA Tempest Roar. This one's fully masterworked, and I got all the bonuses into willpower and max resource, which is both good for the build. I've got a Mad Wolf's Glee, which is pretty terrible, but it does have the 7 ranks, which means that both of my skills are getting those, so it's actually pretty good. I could honestly go for a legendary chest piece with Storm Shifters here instead, and it would be almost the exact same thing. In fact, it could actually be better. For my gloves, I've got Pain Gorgers. Again, the passive's not maxed out, and I'd much rather have the GA on the basic skills, but it's an acceptable early game item. And after doing my initial testing for Pain Gorgers, I do think it's worth keeping it in the build. I'm pretty sure this is the better choice for bossing, which is the one place the build somewhat lacks. And something you'll notice in my gameplay footage is that enemies will take damage further away from me. In fact, I'll show a clip here. And the Pain Gorger's gauntlets are doing extra damage to those enemies that are further away, which is really nice when you're doing things like Infernal Hordes or pretty much anything where there's a lot of enemies with low health. For my pants, I'm currently rocking these. I've got a bunch of resistance to all elements here because it helps me get to T4 faster. But once I get fully optimized, I don't want that here. And I'm actually missing my basic skills, which is very unfortunate, but I might be able to actually roll off my armor here. And I know that I 100% could roll off the armor if I decided to use a different consumable, but I've been using the HP consumable. So I might go ahead and roll for that so I can get some additional damage. An important thing to note here is that I actually realized the importance of Hurricane duration in the build, because when we're using Pain Gorgers, in order to get the passive effect, we need to be dealing damage with a non-basic skill. And Hurricane is so good for that because it's constantly dealing damage. So you want to make sure your uptime for this is nearly permanent. I've got a couple of seconds of downtime right now, but preferably I would have this perfectly maxed out so that I have the exact duration with the cooldown. For boots, I've got the Wild Heart Hunger. I just got this pair, it's actually pretty good. Got the GA and the Heightened Senses, I like that a lot. And it's got a max passive, which is the most important part. You can get away with a max passive and even use a non-ancestral item if you need to. But something to note if you're still leveling is that you can't really use these in Grizzly Rage unless you also happen to have your rune that does your Earthen Bulwark. For the weapon, I don't have the masterworking where I want it. I would prefer that all 3 go into basic skill ranks. And I'm fine with bonuses going into Stormstrike Chains, but preferably it would only go into those 2, and specifically in the basic skills. For my amulet, I did get a lucky GA Toxic Claws, which is pretty nice. And again, I'm still using resistance to all elements on this because I'm trying to meet my early game quota of resistances, but I'll definitely roll this off and go for damage like in Venom later. Now for the tempers on the jewelry, I've got Grizzly Rage cooldown on all 3. Right now, my cooldown is 17.85 seconds, and my duration is 23.5. So I'm actually going to take one of these off real quick and look at this. So yeah, you can see that the cooldown is actually faster than the duration. So I don't actually need all 3 of these tempers. So I'm going to change the written guide so that you don't have the Grizzly Rage recommended for the amulet, because this would actually be better served to be something like armor, and that frees up the need of having the armor affix on the pants potentially. And I did decide to add more maximum life into the build on the rings because I was feeling too squishy and I didn't want you guys to be dying so much in T4. Also, I need to figure this out, but I couldn't find the idol from below in the seasonal crafting thing, so I went with the one that avoids taking fatal damage just because it, you know, prevents us from the random deaths we might get. But maybe I'm just missing something. I don't know why I don't see the idol. For the runes, I did do a little bit of changing, so I went with Ahu Cry. I noticed that the lucky hit chance against non-healthy enemies was working really well with this because we're hitting so many times with high lucky hit chance skills. And I went with the Spiritborn's Vortex so that we're constantly pulling enemies together. Obviously, it would be better to put something like the 100% increased damage here, if we're trying to optimize around boss damage. So if you're pit pushing, you would definitely go for that as an alternative. And if you do go for that, it means you could potentially go for the Ancestral Guidance board if that gives you a higher multiplier, but I don't think it's actually necessary, because at the end of the day, the Ancestral Guidance board doesn't have that many good things except for max resource and the legendary node for us, so I'd prefer to stick to the other ones, but it's something I'm going to consider. By the way, if you've been playing on the build, you probably figured this out by now, but make sure you're casting your Grizzly Rage before it runs off, because if you let it run off and then you try and cast it, you're going to get the whole cooldown back at the end, so you'll have to wait the entire duration, whereas if you cast it while it's currently active, you can recast it again. Another little thing that I knew, but I hadn't really put into practice yet, is your Blood Howl giving 25% more damage when you're in werewolf form is great, but you got to keep in mind that when your Earthen Bulwark triggers, but you've got to keep in mind that when your Earthen Bulwark triggers from your runes, it's going to break your wolf form. So that means if you're trying to optimize, you want to cast your Blood Howl directly after you notice your Earthen Bulwark trigger. And because we have it on Bach, it should be pretty easy to keep track of because you're walking and it's going to trigger while you're walking. Have you been smiling behind me while I've been recording? For the Spirit Boons, I did a couple of changes. So I think I'm going to recommend Iron Feather over the Swooping Attacks. The Swooping Attacks is nice if you can fit it in your build, but if you're having any trouble with survivability, then Iron Feather is going to be the better choice. I also think I may have had Bolster on here before. I made sure to have this on Calamity so we can get our ult duration to the right spot, and we seem to be getting plenty of Fortify without it, so I'm not worried about it. I had also briefly put on Calm Before the Storm on the written guide because when I first started on the character, I wasn't getting enough ult cooldown reduction, but once I got those tempers on, it was fine. So I went ahead and changed this back to Masochistic in the written guide. For the skill tree, I took the points out of Claw. I didn't think it was really worth the little bit of damage that we're getting from it. Realistically, our main source of damage is coming from our Storm Strike anyways, and we're getting a lot of points in Claw anyways just from our increases to basic skills. I also decided because of the Pain Gorger's Gauntlets that Nature's Reach is worth it, because even if we can't chain to enemies that are further away, which sometimes we will, Pain Gorgers is going to be dealing damage to those enemies that are further away, so this is worth having. I also made sure to emphasize Endless Tempest and the maxing out of the ranks in that, and I decided to go with Catastrophe because we actually cast this fairly often. So 8 seconds, and we've got a cooldown of like 20 seconds. So we're getting about 50% uptime on this, so it's actually about as good as Resonance. And you know what? I just realized we're getting a bunch of skill ranks into our Grizzly Rage because of the chest piece that I have on. So when you're at the point in the game, if you're using Mad Wolf's Glee, you can actually afford to take some points out of here, as long as your cooldown is still good. So it looks like for me, I could take all 4 points out, and I could drop those into other places if you can find anywhere useful to put them. So I put a little damage reduction there. I can get some more resistances here, and I may as well grab a little bit extra crit chance. For the Paragon boards, I think I left them mostly the same. There might have been some adjustments that I made, but I'm going to show you my Paragon boards so you have an example of where you might be in the mid game. So as you can see, that I stretched this pretty thin, and it's kind of the same as what I did for my mid game tab in the written guide, but this is an extreme example. I've stretched myself as thin as possible to hit all of my boards in the early game. I even flipped this one upside down in order to be able to optimize and get my legendary node early on. If you're in the very early game, it's pretty good to get your Sinister Tendrils a little bit earlier, because then you can apply poison automatically with this, and you don't have to worry about other sources of poison in the early game. For the consumables, I'm using Elixir of Advantage. I think this is going to be the best choice all around, because this goes into attack speed cap 1, which means that it's a different attack speed cap than what you're capping with your Wild Heart Hunger and your Bestial Rampage. You also get some lucky hit chance, which helps with the rune. And I'm using Redamine Buzz, Soothing Spices, and Spiral Morning. The Spiral Morning is good before you get your Shroud of False Death, because you can hit more of your bonuses in your Paragon boards. But obviously later, once you have your Shroud, you're going to want to go with Willpower here. But just keep in mind that instead of the Redamine Buzz, you can use the Armor one instead if you need the Armor to hit your 1000 cap. Now I'm quickly going to be moving between different builds this season to try and get all of them optimized for you guys as much as possible. So I'm only going to be on Stormclaw for a little while longer, but I am going to push it further and show you guys what a close to maxed out build would look like. If you guys happen to have any Druid items you're not going to use for this season, particularly 2 or 3 GA items, let me know and I'll buy them from you guys. Let me know in the comments below if you guys have any interesting tech for the build that I don't know about. And if you do, I'll test it and then I'll put it into the next video. But on that note, thanks for watching guys, and I'll see you in my next video. Daddy Druid out.
Mama Druid out.
Subscribe to Scream Heart. He's more than an old fart. He makes lots of fun builds. I promise his strings chill. He should probably be faster. Come watch this disaster.